Welcome to the Political Trenches, local government at work. We are back in the trenches looking at the stories and issues that are shaping municipalities across Canada. And today we are continuing our dive into the role of the CAO. We are honored to be joined by a CAO that is calling it a career after 25 years in public administration. Cathie O'Toole, the CAO for the Halifax Regional Municipality, will be joining us later in the episode. But to kick it off, our rundown today includes Manitoba's Auditor General calling for more provincial oversight in municipal operations. Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houson, confirmed that strong mayor powers will not be coming to the province. And we head to the Rock, where a provincial and a municipal election are taking place at the same time. And that is causing some challenges for some candidates. Ian, how is beautiful Newfoundland and Labrador?
Life on the Rock, hey? Yeah, well, I've been here for the last few days. I'll be here for a few days more at the time of this recording. It's the nicest it has ever been here. I'm really quite looking forward to that conversation about the signs, sorry, about the overlapping elections. I'm just noticing a lot of signs and things at the moment because we're living it and it's just fascinating to see. So, yeah, hi from the Rock.
It's going to be fun to dive into some of these stories. And our first story comes from the Canadian press. Manitoba's Auditor General is urging the province to strengthen oversight of municipalities after an investigation uncovered financial mismanagement, weak governance, and inadequate accountability practices. The review, prompted by a 2019-2020 cybersecurity breach that cost the municipality of Westlake Gladstone more than $472,000, revealed that the Department of Municipal and Northern Relations lacks proper process to investigate complaints, monitor grants, and review financial practices. The Manitoba's Auditor General 34-page report outlines 5 recommendations, including implementing baseline cybersecurity measures and developing oversight mechanisms to ensure municipalities safeguard public funds. While the province has acknowledged the concerns and has committed to surveying municipalities on cybersecurity, it has emphasized respecting the autonomy of local governments in managing their internal operations. Now, Ian, autonomy is a buzzword that I'm hearing a lot right now from municipal leaders in every corner of this country. How can Manitoba balance respecting that municipal autonomy while ensuring proper oversight and accountability of taxpayer dollars?
I'm hearing the same thing you are, Chris, about requirement for oversight without going too far in pretty much every province and territory that I speak to. The and it's different, of course, right across the country because, as we all know, municipal institutions are under the control of the various provinces and territory. What that means is we end up with a bit of a patchwork across the country. So what happens in Manitoba is not the same as what's happening in Nova Scotia, for example, and it complicates things. Partly because I think people see what's happening in various municipalities across the country and wondering why it's not the same everywhere. Take for example, the role of the Integrity Commissioner in Ontario, which is not the same as anywhere else either. But because of the fact that every province controls municipalities in one way or another, each province handles it slightly differently. So just to put that on the table first. But in this case, what it appears is that there is an oversight gap. And the gap is perhaps between the provincial government and the local governments. And so we're seeing some of this, in some cases, malfeasance, and in other cases, oversight, lack of foresight that is happening in some of our local government. And those need to be closed, and different provinces are handling it in different ways. However, the vast majority of local governments in this country are not don't have this type of a spotlight shined on them or operating properly or appropriately. They may have issues of their own, small issues, some with sustainability and viability, but they all have challenges to face. We just happen to be hearing about some of the more major ones, perhaps based on that idea from the news about it. If it bleeds, it leads. In this case, these 3 are some of the bleeding municipalities that we hear about, particularly in this case in Manitoba.
What is the role that the province has to take when it comes to these new adaptations of the cybersecurity threats, of AI threats? Because municipalities have a very limited budget and they can't do this all by themselves. There has to be some oversight. What role
Mhm.
does the province have to play in ensuring that municipalities are set up for success and rather than failure? Because every municipality is going to have their own unique set of challenges. And in
Yeah.
Manitoba, there are some small municipalities and very large municipalities like Brandon, Portage la Prairie, Winnipeg. But other smaller ones don't have the same tools that those big ones may have. So, what responsibilities does the province have to play to ensure that all municipalities are fairly on the same level?
But one of the things that the province of Manitoba has done in the last decade or so is, of course, reduce the number of municipalities within the province very significantly. And by doing so, they've increased the average population per municipality. And therefore, I would hope that they've also raised the level of sophistication in those municipalities as well. And so when we see what we're seeing right now, there's a breakdown in the oversight process that's run through a series of events and eventually has ended up to where we're hearing about it now. Ultimately, of course, if we ignore the courts, the in terms of statute and structure, it ultimately this does end up with the province. Ideally, it should have been caught well before that by individuals, by municipalities, maybe by some training associated with provided by the associations. If if we're not able to change, if you think about things like logic modeling, if we're not able to change the inputs, the skills that people have, or the checks and balances that we have, or some of the processes that are in place, we're not going to be able to change the outputs and the outcomes. So I think we have to understand that what we have seen in these cases is the result of systemic failures in a few different areas, some of which are criminal in nature potentially, and some of which are social, and some of which are just lack of process. So ultimately, the province has to either enable municipalities and other organizations to provide this level of checks and balances and oversight. So either provide it or get out of the way. So really, those are the two roles of government: is do something or get out of the way. In this case, the province is suggesting it may need to do more, or the province it is being suggested to the province that they may need to do more. And
On
but I
the
should mention this isn't unique to Manitoba.
No, it's not. And I was just about to say that because it's not an issue that is only dedicated to
Right.
the Keystone province. But I want to turn to our next story, and that comes from CTV Nova Scotia. And it is a topic of discussion that Ian and I have had many times on this show. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston has confirmed his government will not be introducing strong mayor powers in the upcoming legislative session, despite a request from Halifax Regional Council. Speaking on a radio call in show, Houston acknowledged the province has intervened on municipal matters before, particularly around transportation, but said there are no plans to give Halifax Mayor Andy Fillmore the authority to override council decisions unilaterally. The issues arose after a council voted 16 to 1 in July to ask the province to consult on potential legislation granting such powers, with Fillmore casting the lone dissenting vote. Houston's comments signal that municipal decision making will remain firmly in the hands of council rather than shifting authority to the mayor's office. Now, Ian, you and I have chatted about this a few times on the show, but I'm going to ask a devil's advocate question. Does Premier Houston's decision protect democratic accountability?
Wow, that's quite the question. I would suggest that this is something, of course, that has been raised in profile, particularly because of the changes that have been made over the last year or so, year or two now, I guess, in the province of Ontario, with strong mayor powers, with an understanding that there's a lot of this in the United States as well, and I think amongst the public too, that there's probably a common understanding or a common thought that mayors do have more powers than the rest of their elected council colleagues do. In reality, of course, a lot of the other powers they have are symbolic or in terms of running meetings, but they don't have the ability to override the decisions of a council, which is what the mayor in this case was musing about. The province has now come out, of course, during the legislative session, and as we speak, it's only been a few days since that session began, and very early on, it became clear that the premier was not going to move in the direction of providing the strong mayor powers for the regional municipality of Halifax. I would say too that this is a unique circumstance within Nova Scotia, just because of the size of the place. that Halifax, with a population, the Halifax Regional Municipality, so Halifax and environs, has a population of about 500,000 people. The entire province of Nova Scotia runs at about a million. So we're looking at a municipality in this case that has roughly half of the population of Nova Scotia, meaning what's happening with the Halifax Regional Municipality is an order of magnitude different in terms of expertise and capacity and requirements and all of those sort of things than we see in any other local government in the entire province.
Oh, you done?
I'm done.
Oh, sorry. It was like it sounded like you were going to wind up for another paragraph there. I apologize. So I'm going to cut that out. It brings up a question, and if you're listening to this show, you're going to see a theme through the three stories that we're talking about, and that is autonomy. Autonomy, autonomy, autonomy. Now, last episode, we chatted about the role that the province has in dictating what the municipality should do around code of conducts. Should the provincial governments in Nova Scotia or in any province, even Ontario, have a role in shaping how municipalities structure their leadership powers, or should it be left up entirely to local councils?
That's a very philosophical question. I'll give you my opinion. Others may not share it. I think local autonomy is the most important way for this to work. We've often talked about mayors or reeves or wardens being first among equals. I kind of like that, that it means that there is power, effectiveness, efficacy in the council as a whole. Decisions of council are supported by council or ought to be. And that includes the vote of the chief elected official as well. So I like the way it is, the system works in most of Canada. Not a big fan of the strong mayor system at all. We've seen it in most other provinces where there is a consensus model, even to the point where we have to put our hands up to vote yes or no, that where for something to move forward, a majority of council members, including the chief elected official, have to be in favor of something. So to me, that is kind of a core of democracy. When we start to see things like strong mayor powers, we're starting to move from the pure democracy, pure local democracy, more into party-based systems and what happens behind closed doors and whipped votes and all of those sorts of things that are more akin to what we see in the Westminster model in the provincial or federal legislatures and parliament. So I don't think that that's the way we ought to be going for our local governments at all.
It might mark it on the calendar. Ian and Chris agree on something. Let's put it that way. And our final story comes from VOCM. Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador says overlapping provincial and municipal elections pose challenges for both voters and candidates though the situation is not new. MNL President Amy Cody noted that the abundance of campaign signs in various colors and sizes can create confusion, especially when some candidates reuse old signs featuring party associated colors like red, blue, and even orange. The overlap is further complicated by former municipal leaders now running in provincial races, which can blur the distinctions for electorate. Cody added that provincial campaigns often overshadow municipal issues. Quote, of course, the media is going to focus on the provincial, which is the higher level of government, but MNL has done what it can through the Make Your Mark and the You for Council campaign to bring greater attention to municipal matters. Now, Ian, I am in full agreement with Amy in that opinion, President Cody, that often the media looks at the provincial campaign, but in my opinion, municipalities is where it's at. How can municipalities ensure their local issues and candidates get enough attention when provincial elections dominate the media sphere?
My goodness, yeah, I completely agree with municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, MNL as well. And it is, I'm in St. John's as we speak, as we're recording this, and it's a sign forest outside that you mentioned the orange and the red and the blue signs for the provincial parties, but we're also seeing a plethora of other colors dominating from ward councillors or at-large councillors or mayor candidates. And I can imagine it's the same pretty much across the province. And I'm an informed voter. I would be a little confused how all of this is working. The municipal election in Newfoundland and Labrador is on October the 2nd. The election call for the provincial legislature, and that's set by statute. The provincial election call was made either, I think it was probably early this week for October the 14th. So there's less than 2 weeks between the two elections. So in actual fact, these things are going overlapping quite a lot. I haven't paid attention much to the media or broadcast advertising that is happening associated with the two elections, but I think it would be really confusing. And I think MNL kind of saw this coming a little bit and has tried to anticipate how to deal with it. I think they're doing as well as they can under the circumstance, but the parties, of course, are better funded than individual candidates are. So we are seeing a lot of campaign signs and messaging from the provincial party, sorry, the provincial election, which has sprung up where just local election signs had been in the past. So as a casual voter, I'd be really kind of confused by this as well. And I'll add to that, if I may, that there are some existent challenges with this because of the proximity of the two elections, where, and you made a reference to this, there are some currently elected and sitting municipal councillors who are running provincially. And now, in times past, what may have happened is they may have run provincially, and if they hadn't been elected, they would run in the next municipal election. That can't happen this time just because of the way the dates are overlapping. So people have had to choose which election they want to run in. Do they want to represent a provincial riding constituency? Or are they interested in running for a local seat on a council or here in St. John's, a ward or a mayoral seat as well? So there's a lot of overlap and a lot of things that are slightly different this time than you would typically see in a municipal election and a provincial election if they weren't held in such close proximity.
This is like the creation of a perfect storm for Newfoundland and Labrador municipalities, because earlier this year, the original date for the election for municipalities was September 30th. That had changed due to the fact that that was Truth and Reconciliation Day, so they moved it back to October 2nd. So there was a big change there. Then, with it being a minority government in the province, there was a lot of confusion about when the actual election call was going to happen, if they were going to wait the full 4 years or go earlier in the summer. So there was a lot of confusion, and that caused a lot of the councillors who might want to run provincially to wait to see what was going to transpire. How do the local candidates in 2025 in this election get their voices heard? Because I remember the 2021 federal campaign across Canada that overlapped with Alberta municipal campaigns. And the common theme I heard over and over again from local candidates was, when I went to the door or I talked to someone, the first thing they said, are you conservative? Are you liberal? Or are you NDP? Not, what are you going to do about wastewater treatment facilities? What are you going to do about coastal erosion? What are you going to do X, Y, and Z? It was all about the federal issues. How can candidates recapture the narrative, or can they, in this ever evolving political world that we live in?
It's going to be very difficult. The provincial candidates have
Is it
another
bad for
advantage.
democracy?
I think it's definitely bad for democracy. Well, I think it's good that people are elected. I think the fact that the province has chosen the timing that they have chosen to do this is bad for democracy. And the provincial candidates have a bit of an advantage because at some point after the 2nd of October, the local signs are going to disappear. So we're going to be back to just focusing on the provincial election in here in Newfoundland and in Labrador. So that I think now, during the time when both elections are concurrently running, there's a real cloud over not a bad cloud, but a cloud of confusion that is happening over the municipal election candidates. It's very difficult for them to stand out at all. They don't have the same level of funding. They don't have the same common messaging. The only advantage they might have is they're typically running in a ward or a town or a whatever that is smaller than the provincial constituencies would be. So they don't have to knock on as many doors, send out as many brochures, have as many signs as the provincial candidates do. So there's a small advantage there. And in running in small towns, maybe people know each other better rather than over broader constituencies. I think it's very difficult. Times of social media are there, and we're seeing a lot of plastering of the airwaves, plastering of the internet, of streets with campaign messaging. So yeah, I can see it's confusing, and I could understand why. When getting knocked on the door, somebody's going to ask, the homeowner is going to ask, like, which party are you from, regardless of whether you're representing a party or just representing yourself.
Well, it's going to be a story we're going to be paying attention to in our next
Yeah.
episode because this episode is coming out right before that election day on October 2nd. So tune in for episode 3 of the season and we'll make sure we do a little deep dive into the results and what happened there. But now, our interview with CAO Cathie O'Toole. In the heart of every thriving community lies a well crafted strategic plan. But crafting such a plan requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of local needs. Enter Strategic Steps, your partner in municipal strategic planning. Strategic Steps team of experts have years of experience in municipal administration. At Strategic Steps, they just don't develop plans. They co create homegrown strategies tailored to your unique community. They listen, they collaborate, they empower your community to thrive. Contact Strategic Steps today and take the first step towards a brighter future for your municipality. Call Strategic Steps at 780-416-9255 or visit strategicsteps.ca to get started. We are honored today to welcome to the show Cathie O'Toole, the CAO for the Halifax Regional Municipality. After a remarkable 25-year career in municipal administration, O'Toole announced earlier this spring that after a successful career in administration, she would be hanging up her hat and moving into another field as the Vice President, Finance and Administration at Dalhousie University. Cathie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris.
So to kick my line of questions off, Cathie, what's your elevator pitch to people asking what is the role of a CAO?
The role of a CAO is like being an air traffic controller at a very busy airport where you never know what airplane is incoming on any given day, what is going to happen on the ground, and how your crews are going to have to respond.
Wow, that's quite intense. You, of course, probably have the busiest airspace in all of Nova Scotia, I guess, to continue that metaphor. Halifax Regional Municipality, or HRM, has about half the population of Nova Scotia within it. How does a CAO in that role align maybe with CAOs in both Nova Scotia, rest of Nova Scotia, or maybe beyond? How similar are things? How different are things?
So that's a really great question. I had a conversation with somebody just earlier today about this topic because I hate to see when CAOs or senior leaders in large municipalities are dismissive of what they can learn from smaller municipal units. And I think I had the benefit of starting my career actually with the provincial government and doing some work with housing and municipal affairs and interacting a lot with smaller municipalities all around the province of Nova Scotia. And it gave me an appreciation that although the scale is larger and there are some unique characteristics to being urban versus a smaller or more mixed municipality, the programs and services delivered and the challenges you face are really similar. And there are things that the larger municipal units can learn from the smaller municipal units and vice versa.
Do you have a couple of examples of things like that where you do see either overlap, not necessarily overlap, but consistency or differences?
Yeah, so in terms of differences, um, the Halifax Regional Municipality, as well as a few of the other, larger to medium-sized municipalities in Nova Scotia that have more urban centers, certainly struggle with homelessness, certainly struggle with crime or drugs or mental health impact on residents, I think, and addictions than a little different way than some of the smaller municipal units that are primarily rural and less populated.
Hmm.
That would be a difference.
I'm sure it would. Were you CAO during the formation of HRM?
No, I've been in municipal government for 25 years, but I've only been CAO for 3 years. Prior to that, I was the CEO and general manager of the municipal water utility, Halifax Regional Water Commission. It's a water, wastewater, and stormwater utility. And then prior to that, I was the CFO for HRM and the director of infrastructure and asset management. So I was on the executive leadership team at the municipality for about 10 years and went through a number of different positions. So 10 years pure municipal, 10 years over at the water utility, and the rest has been here again. So
you have probably worked with quite a few elected officials of one sort or another over the time you have either sat in the chair you're in right now or other similar chairs as well. If you were to think back to the relationship between elected officials and appointed officials, what do you think is maybe the most important one or two things that maybe a new elected official needs to know? Or maybe that a returning elected official needs to be reminded of from time to time?
I think that the most important thing that elected officials need to be reminded of is that, new ones in particular, is that the public service is meant to be non-political, independent, objective. We're there to serve the whole, not there to serve an individual also. And that our job is to take, you know, also a long-term view and make sure that there's continuity between council to council, and also make sure that, you know, if there are issues, strategic issues, council's trying to decide on where, you know, sometimes they're putting on the lens of the electoral cycle. We always have to make sure that they also have the longer term view that's beyond the electoral cycle and try to keep them focused on that. We also have to try to make sure that they're focused also on regional implications, not just the implications for their district.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. Yeah, when we work with local governments and local administrations, we find things like role clarity to be one of the biggest topics that come up either from administrators or from elected officials as well. How have you had any challenges around keeping role clarity front and center between staff, council, and the rest of it? And how do you, if those have been present, how do you manage that?
I would say there's three areas where I've had some challenges around role clarity. The first is around emergency management. You know, we had some significant events in 2003, a really bad wildfire, a couple of really bad floods, and just the role clarity around the whole incident command structure, the role of the agency administrator versus the elected officials versus the incident commander, particularly when it's a jointly managed incident between the municipality and the province. So thankfully, as a result of those incidents, you know, we and other municipal units have been working really closely with the province and have done a lot of great work. So I think we're in a good place there. The other role clarity issue is regarding police chiefs. Policing is complicated because of the independence of the police chief, but administratively, the police chief reports through to me. And we have a board of police commissioners who has the oversight for policing. So the role clarity around that, you need to have really good governance for the boards of police commissioners. And I guess the third role clarity challenge I had was just with the transition from the outgoing mayor and council to the new mayor and council. You know, it's a fairly big learning curve, especially if you're someone who's newly elected for the first time, to understand, you know, what is my power or authority as a counselor versus a mayor versus a CAO, and how do we all work together?
Do you have any advice for other CAOs? I mentioned we see this quite a lot. I mean, how do you actually maintain that focus on role clarity? How do you challenge a council or a council member who may not kind of be on the same page in terms of what they think their job is versus what the legislation and history would say that it really is?
Well, you know, legislation is often just one tool. I think you also need a really good administrative order or bylaw that sets out more detail around how the council is supposed to operate on a day-to-day basis. I think that helps with role clarity and always drawing the councillors and the mayor back to the legislation, the legislated role, and whatever's in your administrative bylaw.
I'm going to jump in with some questions, but I want to just quickly go back to a question that Ian was talking about the role clarity. I thought this was a perfect time to shamelessly plug his book, Who's Driving the Grader, for anyone who is out there wanting to listen and wanting to read a great book about the roles and responsibilities of CAO and council. Go pick up Ian's book, Who's Driving the Grader. It's a great resource for any new council member. Come on, Ian, shameless
Thanks, Chris.
plug
Way to
time.
go.
But back to Cathie. Now, you're you're into the role of CAO for just over 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. How has the role changed, or your understanding of the role of a CAO changed from day one to where we are today?
So there's been a couple significant changes. In Nova Scotia, there was a legislative change last fall, which imposed a quasi-judicial function on CAOs in Nova Scotia. So it's the ability to uh, basically remove or amend private restrictive covenants on private property. In the past, if I have a property in a subdivision and everybody in the subdivision, bought their lots, built their house at the same time, there might be restrictive covenants on the properties. Now, in the interest of furthering densification and development of housing, the provincial government is trying to make it easier for people to deal with restrictive covenants that might prevent increasing density or increasing height. So we have that authority now, and that's not something that I had ever asked for, or any CAO in Nova Scotia had ever asked for. We've started to process the first few requests to deal with restrictive covenants, and unfortunately, it doesn't matter what your decision is, somebody's going to be aggrieved, and there's going to be an appeal, and it's
You
not a fun
don't say.
process.
You don't say. But let's talk about the public for a second, because while the mayor's the face of council, you of CAO is the face of administration. How does the role of CAO, and how have you looked at the role of CAO in engagement and engagement with the general public of Halifax Regional Municipality? Because I can imagine your job is a lot to do with administration and council, but there's a portion of your job that has to be dedicated to what the residents want. So how do you face that portion of your job?
So I engage with residents, through, if we're doing a public hearing process, I certainly would have some engagement with residents. Public meetings from time to time that the municipality would be organizing, I would be going to them. I go to a lot of meetings if there's a contentious issue on the agenda, like some of the committees of council or the Board of Police Commissioners, even though I'm not a member of the Board of Police Commissioners. So I would be, of course, having to pick and choose based on what is the hot button topic of the day, where I need to appear. And in terms of, that other means of engaging publicly and being the face of the municipality, I think it depends on the reporting relationship with mayor and council and what mayor and council wants you to do. Some mayors and councils like their CAO to be very, you be front facing, you be the spokesman for the municipality. Others prefer it that it's the mayor or speaking on behalf of mayor and council, or a designated, corporate communications type spokesman. I've had experience over the years with different perspectives from elected officials on that, and my position on it's always been, I'll go where you want me to go and do what you want me to do. So, but there are certain times, like for instance, during an emergency management or a state of emergency, where I think it's appropriate, the CAO has to step to the microphone and make sure that the information that's getting out is timely, is accurate, and is useful to people.
There's been a rise in more and more municipalities not having CAOs, SAOs, city clerks, because the role is not as desirable as it once was. 10, 15 years ago, it was a thing that you can get into. But as we talked in the beginning of the interview, 2.8 years is not a career that someone can pick up and move their life for. What is your thoughts on the future of the CAO industry? And I say industry as in the leadership industry in municipalities as you get you ready to leave yourself and start your next career chapter.
I think it's definitely different now, Chris, as you've identified, and I think it is in a bit of a downward spiral. I think that most people aspiring to be CAOs now, particularly in larger municipal units, recognize that it's something you're probably only going to do for 3 to 5 years, and you wait and do it, when you're nearing retirement. But I do think that there is going to be a rebound and a recognition of the necessity of the role of the CAO and the importance of the role of the CAO, particularly in the provinces where they do move away from CAOs, maybe into the strong mayor model. I think there's going to be, you know, I won't say balls get dropped, but I think there's probably a real underestimation of what goes into the CAO role. And I think after a few years, there's going to be a rebound, and it will become a profession or a profession that's more respected perhaps than it is right now. It's been interesting because, strong mayor powers is something that's been swirling around in the media here in Nova Scotia for months. And I try not to read a lot of social media comments, but this is one area where I can't really ignore it. So I go in and I read the comments. And it's amazing the amount of citizens who have no idea what a CAO is or what a CAO does. If I go to a public meeting and speak at a public meeting, I will often start by saying, okay, does anybody here know what a CAO is? What does the CAO of HRM actually do? And have a discussion. And it's always really, really entertaining.
So can I just pick up on that for 1 second? Because I wanted to ask this question, but I didn't know how to fit this in. What is the biggest misconception that you hear from the public about what the CAO actually is and does? Because I can imagine that is like that for me, for Ian, like we are an education podcast. We are an education show where we try to educate people about what the local governments are doing. From your perspective, what is the biggest misconception that you just irk over every time you hear it?
Well, it's funny. I hear two misconceptions, and they're kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum. The one that I hear that irks me the most is the CAO is some shadowy, dark, sneaky, powerful figure who is really behind the scenes running the entire municipality. And, really, CAOs don't do anything without direction from mayor and council. So, for instance, in Halifax this year, we purchased a armored rescue vehicle. That was in the media. Anyways, that got spun that the CAO had gone off and purchased this tank for police, without proper authorization. It was in the municipal budget that was approved by regional council. It was purchased in accordance with a procurement policy approved by regional council with a lot of transparency. So that would be one example. But anyways, the CAO is the all-powerful, shadowy, sneaky figure. That's one that irks me. The other one is the CAO is just like a clerk. Oh, that's just the administrative person. She's like, I don't know, a secretary for council or something.
I can imagine that's going to deter a lot of people from getting into the role, those two complete polar opposites. But I am cautious of time, and I know Ian and I have taken more time than we probably expected. So I have one last question for you before we let you go, Cathie. Now that you are hanging up your hat, how do you hope your time in office will be remembered as you head off to Dalhousie University?
I hope that I will be remembered as somebody who was competent and who had a lot of integrity. That would be my hope.
Well, from our about half hour, 35-minute conversation, I feel like that should be the way that people remember you because I've learned so much. But from Ian and myself, thank you so much from the bottom of our heart for taking time out of your day to do this interview, and good luck in your next chapter.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. And I'm going to run out and get Ian's book, I think, so I can read it.
We'll be right back after a quick message. Our full interview with Cathie will be airing next Monday. Ian, local autonomy, Halifax, and also strong mayor powers. It's a very jam-packed episode, of course, only on the political trenches. We get to learn so much. Thank you so much. And how did you feel like today's episode went?
I really enjoyed it. There was definitely a thread that ran through everything. Of course, our news item that we spoke to about strong mayor powers in Nova Scotia, and then some conversation with the CAO of the potentially affected municipality. Of course, that went really well. And getting sage advice from somebody who's been in local government for so long as she moves on to another phase of her career. I think there's really good learnings there, and see this bookended from our last episode with somebody who's literally been on the job for a few months. It's really interesting to see the progression or transition that happens for a lifelong or a long time CAO.
It certainly will. And we'll continue our journey into the role of the CAO in 2 weeks' time with another great guest. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your favorite podcast platforms. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. The links to the show notes and the stories that we mentioned in today's episode will be in the show notes. And if you want to reach out to Strategic Steps or purchase Ian's book, Who's Driving the Grader, the link will be in the show notes. Highly recommend you go out and grab it. Ian, always a pleasure to be in the political trenches with you.
Thanks, Chris. We'll see you next time.